I've taken Susanna's place today. And normally, this is a little bit out of my comfort zone, should we say. I do like to give talks on the scientific aspects of Spiritism, but this I had a little challenge with, but as always, once one starts researching a topic, my challenge was really to how can I bring it down to 40 minutes in the end. So I'm going to share with you today the topic which is tolerance and respect, which are two of the virtues of the many virtues that we're all striving to improve during our incarnation on this earth. And tolerance is something that you've only got to look at the news of what's been happening these last few weeks, starting in Ferguson in Missouri, with all the problems that really are associated with lack of tolerance for other races, other colours, other customs. Also, I think there's an underlying effect of the society, that we have a lot of differences in society, and we have difficulties often tolerating other people of different incomes, and I think that is what's also behind the disturbances there. Then you go to the Middle East and see what's happening in northern Syria and Iraq, where you have a lot of intolerance for religions, with the extremists are really, the other month we're actually driving out Christians from the north of Syria. So total intolerance. And there's other examples all over the world. So it's a very relevant subject today, and probably as it always has been. So the flow of my talk today is really to practice tolerance and give respect. I think tolerance is a precursor to respect. There's no way you can respect someone if you can't even tolerate their views, if they're different than your own. And as from the slide here, so we can all coexist. It took me a while to get that word there, but coexist is to be together, to grow together, to help one another. And that leads to charity and then to love. And so this whole flow is what I'm going to try and talk about today. So let me start with this chart. I found this chart. I was trying to find out, okay, how are virtues brought into our life? And I came across this chart. It's actually by a Catholic priest. So a lot of the titles there are related to the Catholic faith. But I think it's very applicable, and I'll try and give the Spiritist spin on it. But I see this as, it's called the Chart of Virtues, but I see it more of a path of life, if you like. We're trying to get to the center, which from a Catholic point of view perhaps is the grace of God. For us, maybe we're looking to achieve that spiritual level of pure spirit, and that's our target. And to get there, we have the 7 virtues around the center. The theological virtues were brought to us by Paul of Tarsus: hope, charity, and faith. The cardinal virtues actually have originated with Socrates and later with Cicero in Greek philosophy. So those are the 7 virtues. And the outer ring before that on the chart here is gifts of the Holy Spirit. And I think from a Spiritist, my interpretation of that is the values and the virtues that we bring with us from other incarnations. We all come into this world with 50% of our genes from each of our parents. So we have the nature, and then we have the nurture, which is as we grow up in our environment with our parents and guidance. And those are the two that form who we are. But there's a third element, which we know from a Spiritist point of view. And again, that's the learnings from the previous incarnations. And there's a lot of evidence of that too, I think. Anyone who's brought up 2 children or more realize that, yes, we've got the same gene pool, we've got the same nurturing, but the personalities and the traits are so different. And how can you explain that? And then further out is all the other virtues, or many other virtues: modesty, chastity, joy, peace, etc., etc. And we are probably somewhere in here. Sometimes we'll maybe be even stray into the outer zones, where we go into the vices. I mean, vices and virtues are not always black and white. There's a grey area. I think we're all guilty in some of experiencing some of these capital sins. But again, nowhere on this chart it talks about respect, tolerance and respect. So I then started searching more and more. So what are the virtues? How many virtues are there? And there's not really a consensus, but there is a convergence that perhaps are around, in this case, 52 virtues. So it's a good job we have many incarnations, because we've got a lot to work on here. These are listed in alphabetical order. So they're not in any hierarchy of which are the ones that are more important than others. But today we're going to talk about tolerance and respect. And first of all, let's look at the definitions of tolerance. And from the Oxford English Dictionary, tolerance is described as the willingness to accept feeling, habits, or beliefs that are different from one's own. And again, it's to accept the feelings but not necessarily agree with them. Whereas respect, respect is a feeling of admiring someone or something that is good, valuable, important. And again, I want to reiterate the point of that unless you can tolerate someone, there's no way you can get to the next stage, which is respect. However, there's a very good rule to help us develop all these gifts of character, all these virtues. And that rule was, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That is the golden rule. And with that, at least one has, by following that rule, we're a long way to developing all the virtues that we're here to develop during our lifetime. Let's talk a little bit about United Nations, UNESCO. Let me go back here. So this is a Norman Rockwell picture. I'm a great fan of Norman Rockwell, especially his early illustrations, but he was probably one of the greatest American illustrators and painters of the last century. He was often criticized as being just an illustrator, maybe a little superficial, but in his later years he started to develop a lot of very good pieces of art, and this one was actually published on the Saturday Evening Post in beginning of 1961. And it depicts, as you can see, all the different nations and creeds and costumes. And he did a lot of research for this. He was obviously very well traveled. He could have never have made all those illustrations with so much humor and really capturing the American psyche. But in the later 50s, he did a lot of traveling internationally. He used to sketch and take photographs, even acquire costumes. And when he came back to the United States at the end of the 50s, he started working on this piece. And he actually took individuals from New York. These are all real faces. So he used models with different races and different origins, either immigrants or exchange students, and he put together this picture. In 1965, 4 years later, the United Nations inaugurated a new building in New York, and they asked each of the individual countries to contribute towards that building. And the US commissioned a mosaic representation of this. So instead of being a 8 by 10 picture on the front of a magazine, it became a 8 foot by 10 foot mosaic weighing over a ton. And it was actually located between the Security Council and the General Assembly room. So it's one of a very prominent position. In fact, I don't know if you realize, but these last few years, the UN building, after being there for 50 years, is being renovated, and this picture was actually taken down, found to be in a very poor condition, a lot of cracks, missing mosaics and colors. So it was recovered and put back into place in February this year. But the reason I'm connecting this with the UN is that in 1995, which is the 50-year anniversary of the United Nations, which started just after World War II, to celebrate the 50-year anniversary, they declared the Year of International Tolerance and built up a charter, and all the countries of the UN at that time signed it. And this is just a quotation from the charter. And the charter said, it recognizes the dignity, equality, and mutual respect of men, that peace must be founded, if it is not to fail, on the intellect and moral solidarity of mankind. In the climate of rapid social change and new kinds of conflicts, the promotion of tolerance appears ever more urgent. And I think, again, that was 1995, but here, almost 20 years on, still very relevant, that phrase. If we look at a bit more about the Golden Rule, it really is, it addresses the ethics of reciprocity, or it's a maxim for our moral guidance. Some people all talk about the Silver Rule, which is the cautionary form, which is do not do unto others what you do not want them to do unto you. And that sort of expands the meaning a little bit. I need to refer to my notes here. So psychologically, it really helps us empathize with other individuals. Sorry. Okay, psychology helps us empathize with other individuals. Philosophically, it recognizes that every other person is also an I or a self like myself. And you can extend that to society, where you can recognize that I'm part of a group, but they're also part of a group. And it's based in religion. A lot of people would think that the ownership of the golden rule was from the Bible, from Matthew 7 verse 12 in the New Testament. But in fact, there's a lot more. You can find similar or related phrases, edicts in other religions. Just to quote a few here. From the Bible and the Torah, love thy neighbor as thyself is one of the many references. Islam teaches no one of you is a believer until he desires for his brother that which he desires for himself. In Buddhism, hurt not others that hurt yourself, that you yourself find hurtful. And in Hindu, it summons us not to do unto others which would cause pain if done unto you. And even there's one here I found from Yoruba, which is a religion in Nigeria and Africa. One going to use a pointed stick to catch a baby bird should first try it on himself. A little pragmatic, but I think it's still carrying the same message. I have here a video, and unfortunately I couldn't embed it into the presentation, so just bear with me 1 second. And I'll see if I can pull it up. This video is from the UN site and celebrates the International Day of Tolerance. By the way, yeah, it was 1995 was the first International Year of Tolerance, but since then, every November the 16th, which was 2 weeks ago today, they have an International Day of Tolerance. And I seem to have lost my sound. Oh, it's coming.
Irritated. You know what helps you? Try to find something in the person that you love. You will say nothing. Make it try. You will find something that's good about the person. When you can find that, it will help you over your hatred.
Una niña de 13 años en Jerez, que es un pueblo de Cádiz, realmente no estaba muy bien vista, me llamaban bruja, me llamaban de todo lo malo, porque aquí la gente es muy cerrada. Entonces, eso es algo que deberíamos concienciarnos todos y ser un poco más abiertos y no juzgar a las personas por su apariencia física.
Plein de gens ne te regardent pas quand ils passent dans la rue parce qu'ils ne veulent pas penser qu'il y a quelque chose de peut-être comme ça. Bon, pas regarder. Ou alors quand ils le voient, je n'ai pas vu, je passe. En vrai, ils sont mal. Ils me regardent, ils me disent est-ce que c'est bien, est-ce que je lui apporte quelque chose, elle était comme ça, non, je l'incite peut-être à rester comme ça. Ton destin, t'as envie de donner donne, t'as pas envie de donner, j'ai un sourire, ne passe pas sans regarder. Ce qui tue le plus, c'est la différence, c'est les gens qui passent et qui ne te voient pas.
Ben oui, il faut être tolérant, il faut comprendre que bon, il y a des gens qui n'ont pas été exposés à la différence et leur donner le temps d'accepter, mais il ne faut surtout pas tomber dans le panneau et se dire oh ben ils m'aiment pas, je les aime pas non plus, ils me font peur, on parle pas pareil, on mange pas pareil. Je crois qu'il faut vraiment, le mot-clé c'est la tolérance et la patience, quoi. Les deux mots-clés c'est attendre peut-être des fois que l'autre vienne à soi.
Accept people as they are. You know, don't try and overrun their life because you're stronger than they are. Accept them. And it comes down to individual people, rather than then it will grow into a community, and then the community gets bigger, and then it's the world. But individually, one-on-one first. Accept that person who's next to you, just as they are. Don't try and change them.
Mais si déjà on n'arrive pas à vivre ensemble, à l'intérieur d'une famille, comment voulez-vous qu'on passe le reste? La tolérance, elle commence là.
And I remember taking African American children with my children, which wasn't a popular thing to do many, many years ago in the South. And this little African American boy, and we were going to a museum together, all of us together, and having this great moment of joy. And he looked at my son Matthew, who had his head poked out of the window, and he said, "Boy, you got the kind of hair that blows in the wind." And I just remember small moments like that when there was really that kind of interaction between two children. So what really gives me joy is really what I think democracies are all about. The most important thing, in my opinion, that can be done in a democracy is an encounter of strangers. And that gives me joy.
Well, so I change over here. I think it's a very interesting video, very illuminating. There's so many different aspects of tolerance that are treated there, that are addressed in terms of political tolerance, racial tolerance, stereotyping people. There's a couple of things that I'd like to, that resonated with me. One was this comment from the last lady who had the little boy whose hair blew in the wind. She mentioned that democracy is really an encounter of strangers. And I started to reflect a bit on my life. I was born in the north of England. My parents, who are no longer with us, but they were married for over 60 years, and they actually lived in 4 houses that you could actually draw a 1-mile circle around. So they were very, very much rooted there in their life. But again, people I admire very much and respect so much. My sister, she moved out of town. She went 5 miles away, so she was a bit more adventurous. She was actually, last month they were married 50 years. But I was the black sheep of the family. I went first to university, and then my first job was in the centre of England, and then in the south of England, where I started working for Johnson & Johnson. And from there, I met one of the executives from Brazil, and I got talking, and I got this idea of, I'd like to go and visit Brazil. I knew nothing about Brazil. So off I went to Brazil. I was offered the job there. Initially for supposedly 4 years, ended up spending 7. And then I was asked to work in a project in China. So I went first of all to the US, lived in the US, and then went to Shanghai, and this was in the time, in the mid-70s, when it was just opening up, and a very challenging environment to work in. After that was finished, after 3 years there, I went back to Brazil, spent another 5 years in Brazil, then came to the US in New Jersey, eventually got a transfer down to the company in Florida, which I decided after 25 years of corporate life, that was enough for me. But the point I'm making, I'm certainly not meaning to boast or anything like that. I'm just saying I made decisions that really helped me create the character I am today. I think I'm a very tolerant person, and I think being exposed to other cultures and other belief systems, etc., is a way that we can really open up. Because so much of tolerance originates from fear, for ignorance, and then fear. And that's where we build these barriers up. We just don't know about that, so it must be something that's threatening to us. And I think the other point in this video was from the Frenchman with his flat hat there, who mentioned about really tolerance starts in the home. And in fact, if you look at the difficulties we have in our lives, a lot of the greatest difficulties we find are that we're our own family members. So with that being said, I'd like to go on now to some more of the spiritist literature. If I can get set up again here. Okay, and we're going to start with Allan Kardec. And there's very little in the Spiritist books that I could find about tolerance and respect. The first place I went to was the part 3 of the moral laws and the laws of society. In fact, even though the moral laws are the biggest part of the Spiritist books, the law of society are only about 7 or 8 questions, I believe. But Kardec actions in question 768. In seeking societal living, do people only obey a personal sentiment, or is there a wider providential purpose involved? And the spirits answered, humans must progress. They cannot do so alone, however. Since they do not possess every faculty, they become brutish and withered. I sense that Kardec was maybe this answer needed a bit more explanation. So he added another note about it to explain it further, because really the answer talks more about you can't be in isolation, because then you don't develop and don't grow. So he adds, no single individual possesses the complete range of faculties. It is through social union that individuals complete one another in order to ensure their own welfare and progress. It is because they need one another they are being created to live in society and not in isolation. And further on in the Spirit's book, in that same chapter on the moral laws, in the last chapter in fact, where he talks about virtues and vices, in question 903 he addresses another part of the spectrum of tolerance. And we talked about tolerance against religion, against race, against sexual gender perhaps, and other things. But one of the biggest challenges of tolerance is to tolerate someone who makes mistakes, and those mistakes can affect you. And this is what he addresses in this question. Is it wrong to study others' defects? If it is for the purpose of criticizing them, it is wrong, because it displays a lack of charity. If it is with the intention of applying it to oneself in order to avoid the same defects, it may be useful. And the Spirit's going to say, you must not forget, however, that tolerance for the defects of others is one of the virtues entailed in charity. Before criticizing people's imperfections, think about whether others may say the same about you. So try to possess qualities that are the opposite to the defects you criticize in others. We're so apt at criticizing others, but really we're upset because we know that defect lies deep inside us. If you criticize them for being avaricious, be generous. For being harsh, be nice. For acting with pettiness, be expansive in all your actions. In a word, act in such a way that the words of Jesus may not apply to you. And of course, these are the words of Jesus. You seek the speck in your neighbor's eye, but not the plank in your own. Andrea also pointed me in the direction of a new, not a new work, but a new translation that it's almost going to be published soon, from Giovanna De Angelis, psychographed by Divaldo Franco. And this particular chapter referred to Jesus and tolerance. In terms of in-depth psychology, the issue of judging other people's wrongs is a serious inhumane act towards the one who erred. The problems of a sin belongs to the one who committed it, who afterward is subject to the painful process of self-punishment, seeking, even unconsciously, to break free of the wrong that, as guilt, weighs so heavily on the conscience. Guilt is a perturbing shadow cast over the personality, responsible for awful diseases that cause woes of various kinds. Engraved on the innermost panels of the individuality, guilt automatically programs its own reparation process. And I think this is a very powerful statement. Depending on your degree of wrongdoing, it comes back to haunt you either in this lifetime through disease or through deterioration of the mind or whatever, but also not in following lifetimes. And she goes on to say, I'll just paraphrase a few paragraphs here. As we accuse and judge each other's wrongs, we yield to the dark trade of pleasure and or vengeance in pointing out weakness in other people who always deserve the same compassion that we would expect for ourselves in similar situations. In judging the actions of others as incorrect, accusers project their own shadow in the form of self-justification, which will not rid them of their own stains. Jesus was always very strict when teaching those who judge other people's behavior. Judging the person is a manifestation of the ignorance of the causes of problems and demonstrates the moral primitiveness of humans who still act like wolves towards others. Have compassion on those who err. Their conscience will be their judge. Help those who stumble. Their weakness is already their punishment. Tolerate wrongdoers. They are your future. Should you not be strong enough to proceed rightly, your tolerance towards the unfortunate will come the emotional measure of compassion you yourself will receive when your own time comes. For no one is blameless or perfect. I think it's a very powerful, and I'm looking forward to seeing the whole book in English. Okay, I think it's interesting as well to explore a little bit about the limits of tolerance. For all the other virtues, there is no limit. The more virtue, more kindness we have, the better person we are. But I think with tolerance, it's somewhat different. There's a danger of being too overly tolerant. And I think anybody who's been a parent who knows the challenges of bringing up children, where you have to put limits on the child. Yes, you want them to make their own decisions and their own mistakes, because by their mistakes they learn. But you have to be also wary of things that they may do that will be harmful to them. So there's a limit to the tolerance in that respect. The other aspect of tolerance as well, excuse me a second, is in, let's say, religious tolerance, where yes, we respect and tolerate other people who have different religious views. But when those views become extreme, that they endanger yourself or humanity, then there is a limit to that tolerance you can take. And those are some examples. Josh McDonald has a very good video, I think in the interest of time, and also the mechanics of I couldn't put the video in here today for some reason. But it's called, if you go to YouTube and put in Josh McDonald tolerance, he talks about the new tolerance. And it's, I don't agree with all his propositions, but it's a very interesting video. It's about 4 minutes long. I really recommend you see it. It's very provoking and very stimulating. When Susanna gave the talk last week, it got me thinking a little bit about my story where I said about I moved countries so many times and houses so many times. I don't think I ever lived in one house more than 5 years. But it made me think that there was another element of the choices I made. And I think that element was that to some extent I was escaping something I didn't like in my surroundings at that time, whether it was my boss or my lifestyle or the friends. And sometimes, you know, I would say I was making these choices through a lack of self-respect, or blaming myself for certain things around me. And of course, those things still followed me. I was trying to leave those things behind when I moved to a new place. But of course, a lot of it was inside me. And I think it's only these last few years, maybe it's old age, maybe it's being married to Fatima, I don't know. But I feel so much more content in myself now. And I've been in my current house for 10 years. I intend to spend the rest of my life there. So. But self-respect is so very important. Before we can respect others, we must have that respect for ourselves. Psychologists insist that respecting others is impossible until we learn to respect ourselves. They believe that individuals lacking in self-respect are mistakenly too focused on helping others and not taking care of their own needs. That's another aspect of it. So, in summary, at least it's time from debate. The golden rule is so important. It helps us to really develop all the virtues and helps us with our spiritual evolution. Part of that is living in society. That's what we need. That's what we're designed for. That's what the planet was designed for. And it helps us practice tolerance that we need. It starts at the home, tolerating and being in comfort with your own family is so important. It encompasses different beliefs, but also the mistakes of others. And there are boundaries to tolerance, as I mentioned, as compared with other virtues that we may talk about. And respect, the boundaries lead, this leads to respect after mastering the tolerance, and then with self-respect, we can really respect others. So tolerance leads to respect. Respect helps us coexist together, and that means we help each other, and we have charity, and charity leads to love. And that's really the theme of my talk today. I'd just like to end with some more words from Josh McDonald. He's, I think he classifies himself as a Christian apologetic, meaning he justifies Christianity through reason, through history. He's made a very big contribution. He has over 100 books on religion. I don't agree with a lot of it. I've read some of them. But I'd like to take a quote from this, I think it's a magazine actually, Focus on the Family. We must always remember, however, that when the Apostle Peter told us, always prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give reason for the hope that you have. He added, but do this with gentleness and respect. We must aggressively practice love. Everyone loves love. And he goes on to say, tolerance simply avoids offending someone. We must help our children live in love, which actually seeks to promote the good of another person. Tolerance says, you must approve of what I do, but love responds, I must do something harder. I will love you, even when your behavior offends me. Tolerance says, you must agree with me, but love responds, I must do something harder. I will tell you the truth because I am convinced the truth will set you free. Tolerance says, you must allow me to have my way, and love responds, I must do something harder. I will plead with you to follow the right way because I believe you are worth the risk. Tolerance seeks to be inoffensive. Love takes risk. Tolerance glorifies division. Love seeks unity. Tolerance costs nothing. Love costs everything. I think it's a beautiful text. So with that, I thank you for your tolerance and hopefully respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.